Hey guys, it's Ross, and today we're unboxing the GEEKOM A8 mini PC, and this has a Ryzen 9 inside it. And the interesting part is the onboard GPU. And the model I'm looking at today has 32 gigs of DDR5 RAM. It's got a Ryzen 9 8945HS, so of course a mobile chip, and it's got a 2TB Gen 4 SSD, along with Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.2. And of course this comes in a small package, as that is the mini PC right there. It is tiny. And I'm also super impressed, you'll get to see this shortly, is actually the power brick. So on the last little mini PC I checked out, which was Intel, it had a massive power brick. This one's tiny. And I love that because the last one took over my laptop spot as a mobile kind of editing rig. And this one's going to take over that one's spot because the compactness and the power of this mini PC is freaking incredible. So what comes in the box? Well, you have a VESA mount which allows you to hide this behind a monitor, but you could easily jerry-rig it to mount it to a desk or a wall, whatever you might like, and this PC could easily disappear. You've also got a power brick, an HDMI cable, and a power cord. Now let's take a look at the I/O. On the front, you've got a power button, headphone jack, and two USBs. One is high power. You've got a media card reader on the left-hand side, and then on the back, you've got a power. You've got HDMI, USB-C, and I think that's 40 gigabyte a second. You've got Ethernet, two USBs Type A's, another USB Type C, but 10 gigabit along with an HDMI. And it's cool. It's very small, and it's actually kind of interesting to compare this to the other GEEKOM that I've reviewed, which is the Intel version, which is in blue. I prefer the silver, and you'll notice the difference in overall size. I love the silver one, more rounded edges, a little bit smaller, but this is where it actually makes a big difference in the height. So I think as my little mobile, editing rig, this is going to replace the blue one, the Intel one, for sure. And this is the other thing, the power supply. So the Intel one, huge power supply, like absolutely, I would say easy 4 times the size of the little AMD one here. And that again is going to make it easier to transport. Now the Intel one, you can put an extra SSD in it, so that maybe is a reason to get it. But for me, if you're buying a mini PC, you're getting it because you want it as many as possible. That's the freaking selling point, right? That's where you put down the extra money, because miniaturizing stuff is more expensive. So of course, I would go for something as small as possible if I'm going this way. Now let's take a look at the insides. So it's 4 screws underneath the feet to release the bottom plate. Then you have an additional plate there that is basically a heat sink. It helps to keep the drive and a few other things a bit cooler. And you can see it's got a few thermal pads to help move that heat around. And we've also got a little cable connecting to the top, which is the Wi-Fi antenna. So if you take this off, make sure not to, of course, break that. Then we have 4 more screws to remove. The Intel version was a little bit easier to take apart, I gotta say, but this isn't much harder. Also be noted, you got to take that little black bit of tape off too, so you can get the plate off without damaging the antenna piece too. And then underneath that, you've got easy access to your M.2 drive, which is 2 terabyte in this one, and the 32 gig of DDR5 RAM, but you can put in there 64 gig if you want. Now let's talk about CPU performance. So I'm currently on a 13 Gen i9, and my previous editing rig was a Ryzen 3700X. And you can see the difference between the top-end desktop chip and the mobile chips that these mini PCs use. But what I'm amazed by is, of course, they beat the 3700X, which was my old editing rig as of last year. So that is incredible, because that's a full-on desktop with a desktop cooler, and these are able to outperform that CPU. That to me is incredible for the the size. Like, we're talking easily 1/100th of the size of that desktop computer. That's mental. But when you compare single core performance, that's where things get a lot closer between the full-on desktop and these mobile chips. So now let's talk about gaming performance. So in the last video where I went over and did my conclusions of the Intel little mini PC, the one thing it really lacked was gaming performance. The Iris graphics that are on the Intel chips are just rubbish. You can barely play Rainbow Six Siege at 1080p with them. So I was kind of expecting the AMD one here with better integrated graphics to do a little bit better, but it did a lot better. So this actually is able to run Siege at 1440p with a selection of high and medium settings, which is incredible. and you can get over 100 FPS if you really want to. Like, you can bring this at 1080p, you can be running over 100 FPS. So that's amazing. So I decided to run two different versions here. One is 1440p with a selection of high and medium settings with no FSR, which is the upscaler you can use. And I also played the game in DirectX version. And then I also did it in the Vulkan version with FSR on. But I did notice something. There was a little issue, which was at the bottom left corner, it kept saying low VRAM, which is not actually the case, because the APU can use whatever it wants from the RAM on the motherboard, which is of course 32 gigs. So it was able to use the maximum texture setting in game without a single issue, but that warning would persist in the Vulkan version, even though it wasn't actually a problem. Now that RAM is allocated automatically, and in some systems you can go into the BIOS and select a different value, but unfortunately in this machine's BIOS you cannot change that. Like I said though, the APU does allocate whatever it needs at any given time. I just unfortunately could not get rid of the warning even though it wasn't impacting performance at all. So seriously impressed with the gaming performance here on this mini PC, as it absolutely blows Intel out of the water. However, I will just take a step back and give a reality check here. We're talking about the same gaming performance you can get from a GTX 1080, which is an extremely old card at this point. So APUs are getting more powerful, and definitely AMD has made major improvements, but you're still talking about, when comparing it to a desktop, not being nearly as powerful. Again, with this machine, it is an extremely powerful production PC, and of course in a tiny form, but it is not really dedicated towards gaming. However, this one is definitely quite good for some medium gaming, especially in esports titles. Now let's move on to conclusion. So first of all, I'm not getting paid any money for this. I turned down any affiliates. There's links in the description below, and there's a coupon code for a discount, but I'll get no kickbacks because I don't want anything, changing my review here. So basically, the way I see this is this PC is cool. It's an expensive mini PC. Of course, if you're miniaturizing something, it gets more expensive. Right now, there is deals on as it's their anniversary. So they're going to have some good deals if you want to go pick something like this up. And then overall, I love this little thing. I love the last little mini PC, and it already replaced my laptop. This is now replacing that other mini PC because it's awesome. Now, I think it's going to end up becoming my travel PC and editing rig when I travel, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to use. And then at home, this is going to be my little secondary gaming machine for Rainbow Six Siege when I'm doing my Mythbusters series. So it's going to be extremely good to actually play on the second machine at 1440p, which is brilliant because I was having it on the Intel one, I was having to do it under 1080p. So that's sensational. So I'm loving this. But overall, the simple takeaways here is that if you want better graphics performance, go for a full-on desktop and get yourself a dedicated GPU. If you're wanting something that is mini and has a bit of power behind it, and you do want a little bit more gaming performance, then this thing is incredible. And if you're more focused on productivity and video editing, then I'd go for the Intel version. And the Intel version can be extended with a 2.5 SSD if you want to put it in the top of it. So there's a lot of good options here. And yeah, seriously impressed with this. This is actually a lot better than I thought it was going to be for gaming performance. So I am extremely impressed with it. But I would go and of course watch a few other reviews out there. I know Kudos has been getting some of these mini PCs as well. So I'd go and check out his reviews too. But anyway guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.